All right, we are live on Rumble and YouTube and X. Let's see where else. And we're about to go live on Instagram. Okay, got it going. We are live on all of them. Welcome back to Prophecy and Politics. I'm your host, Joshua Fontanilla. Like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let's get right into it. I wanted to do a quick live, jumping through some of the headlines in the world today, but I wanted to start off with immigration. And our subject today is how Christians should view immigration. How should Christians view immigration? Let me get this on the screen here. No, I lost it. One second. Okay, one second here. I'll give you guys a second to join me anyway, which is, so this is fine. We're going to share a window and we're going to share this window. Okay, we got it. We got it. There we go. There we go. All right. So let's get started. So welcome back to Prophecy and Politics. I'm your host Joshua Fontanilla. We are live on Instagram, X, Rumble, YouTube. Where else are we? Facebook, all that good stuff. Please like, share, subscribe, all those places. Now, we are going to look at immigration today. In particular, I want to look at how a Christian should view immigration. So let's look at a few stories here to kick this off. Here's a study by ethnicity of food stamps by ethnicity. Look at this. Look at this right here. Look at this. 45% of Afghan immigrants, 42% of Somali immigrants, 34, almost 35% of Iraqi immigrants, and 23% of Haitians in the U.S. on food stamps. In the U.S. on food stamps. Now you look at those numbers compared to any other, race, and it's in the U.S. and it's crazy. The amount. Hold on. Hey, out of there. Sorry. This is the joys of going live. I have to tell my dog not to eat the cat food. So forgive me. All right. So this is what's happening in our country. We're getting looted in broad daylight. Looted in broad daylight. This is not normal, and this is something that no other country, you look in history, the idea of just having foreigners come in and just giving them massive amounts of free stuff. We've never seen anything like this in world history. It's new and it's patently insane. Other countries don't do this. But what I want to look at today is how should Christians view this? Because there is this push and pull between the idea, and let me get back on the screen here, between, Christians viewing themselves and wanting to be nice and wanting to take care of others and wanting to help versus, just straight up civilizational collapse. We're going to lose this country. We're going to lose the West. The whole thing's going to collapse if we continue like this. You just cannot have a society like this. My pets are very active today. I got the cat in the background here. She is like a predator, stalking her prey, and the prey is my lap. So I have a very loving cat. We raised her right. Okay, let's see here. Let me get this back on the screen. I want to look at a few headlines before we dig into all of this. Just a few of the headlines. And it's going to be tricky for me because I'm trying to do this there we go. I'm trying to do this. Now you can do on StreamYard, you can do live streaming vertical and horizontal. So if you're on Instagram, you're getting this vertical. And if you're on YouTube or some of the other platforms, you're going to get the option of horizontal. All right, let's look at some of these other headlines going on today because I wanted to briefly discuss this. Of course, Candace is always in the news lately because she is a walking Jerry Springer show. We'll talk a little bit about that. Unfortunately, I have another story I want to talk about. Another Christmas market attack in France. 10 were uh, there was 10 fatalities if a guy drove through a Christmas market. So this is the kind of thing that happens when you just allow endless immigration into your country. Okay, the Hart-Keller Act of 1965 and white replacement. And I think this is a good place of any to kick this off because this is something that Trump has recently just mentioned, which I will say briefly. You guys have maybe heard me criticize the president a lot, and I'll talk about some W's because he's had some great victories recently. And I voted for the president 3 times, but this is why I criticize, and this is why people like me criticize, because when you speak up loudly, the conversation changes. I know you're going. Some people will mock, say, "Oh yeah, you think no." It is a big deal. What I and others and you guys, if enough people are talking about something loudly on the internet with our friends, politicians, they got their ears to the streets. They got their finger checking which way the wind's blowing. And if we're loud enough, they will switch positions. It's very important. You do these politicians no favors by just staying silent and rubber stamping anything they say. Criticize them, not because you hate them, but because you want them to do the right thing. So I don't criticize the president because I dislike him necessarily. I don't know the guy. He's not my friend, not my enemy. You know what I mean? Like, he's a politician is your employee. As a U.S. citizen, you're the boss, and we should be, hey, pushing our employees to do the right thing. And that goes for Congress, president, whoever is in. And so people have been loudly talking more and more about immigration, and to the point where Trump has even mentioned, even the mentioning of the 1965 Immigration Act is a massive win that this is even being discussed. Should we revamp that? And here's a chart showing the different racial groups or the different countries that birthplaces of U.S. immigrants as a percentage of the total population. And so here you see over time the shift, the change, and whoever made this map has very appropriately color coded. There's lots of brown. There's lots of brown on this end, which you get mad at that if you want. Whatever. I'm Mexican, Puerto Rican. I'm not offended. I don't care. But you see that there is a shift from Europeans to brown people, and we're talking. I mean, there's a lot of India here in recent times. There's a lot of Southeast Asia. Of course, there's a lot of Mexico, Central America. We all know that. Africa. There's a big shift in the groups, and something that I think people have a hard time wrapping their minds around is that we are bringing in more immigrants today, legal and illegal, into the U.S. today than we did during the Ellis Island era. When in our minds we have this picture of history of Ellis Island where these massive of people were coming off boats and they were being processed on this island, and some were let in, some were rejected, blah blah blah. And this was the time of massive immigration into this country, and it was when the country was expanding, when the country was growing to the west, and we had a whole continent to fill, and a lot of it was empty. I mean, this is when the government was just giving out acres of land to anybody who was willing to come and set up a homestead on a piece of land. We just give you acres because we had so much land. It was like we need to fill this continent that the U.S. was just given. But now we're the country, we've got hundreds of millions of people, and yet today we're bringing in more people today, more foreigners than we did during the Ellis Island era. when you would think that would be the time where we're bringing in the most people. You would think we would slow it down now. A lot of people don't know the history on this, but in it was something, I think it was 1924, we put a halt to virtually, like, it was something like 95% of immigration. Just nothing. No one comes in. Now there were some exceptions for illegals that happened later on, temporary workers. But for the most part, we just said, look, we've had enough immigrants. Stop. We need to let people stay here for a long time and assimilate. We need to pause. And we did that for like 40 years, from the 1920s till the 1965 Cart Heller, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, Keller Act of 1965, when we basically started the process of white replacement. Now, I say that, and some people are going to get offended right away. And the topic is, how should Christians view immigration? And some people are going to get offended right away and say, oh, it's not the Christian thing to even mention race and in these topics. And I would just ask, first of all, how would you view it if it was any other racial group? If we were talking about Nigerians being replaced by the Swedish just coming in and taking over their land, you would be righteously indignant. You'd say that's wrong. Or if we were saying, look, here's the Chinese, and if Americans were, or the Japan, here's Japan, small island, right? You can kind of get the idea of taking that over. So what if Americans just came in and just started buying up large portions of Japan, which they would never allow? Japan wouldn't do that. They're not that stupid. But what if that was happening and a bunch of white Americans were coming in there and taking over large portions of the country, and just, this is white areas and white cities and so forth? We would say, that's not right. You can't just take over somebody else's country like that. We would have a problem with it. Why? But when I say, hey, white people are being replaced in America, there's something inside a lot of Americans, and in particular a lot of Christians, who that just seems, are you being a bigot, Joshua? Why is it only white people? I think it's because we have been brainwashed. Our educational system has been brainwashed, and we've been twisted ever since World War II. But probably before then, our educational system has brainwashed the masses. And we have this perverted view of Christianity, where we have taken some of the good aspects of it and taken them to extremes that don't make any sense. And that will destroy a country if they're allowed to continue. And it's not racist or bigoted to notice these trends. When America first started, we were allowing in people from various European countries. So look at this: England, right? Ireland, the Italians, Germany, Europe in general. Just, here's kind of non-specific, but that's the vast majority. And even then, you look at the history in New York, and these people congregated largely into little groups and tried to take over whole neighborhoods. Right? You had Little Italy, you had Italian areas, you had the Irish areas, you had German areas. People segregated and just kind of coexisted like that for a long time. And these groups are they live very close to each other in Europe. And there's a lot of commonalities in culture, religions that are very similar, if not the same in a lot of cases, and ethnic traits that are very similar. Today, we would just call all those people white people, right? We generally don't even distinguish those groups in America. We will if they're European countries, but in Europe. But in America, if somebody's German, you just, he's white. Irish, he's white, right? I'm Irish on my dad's side. I just say I'm half white. Usually that's what you do in America, right? We had these groups that were similar ethnicities and cultures, and they still kind of didn't fully assimilate amongst each other at the beginning. How much more when you take someone from freaking Somalia or India, with the Hindu culture and the ethnicity is vastly different. The culture, the religion, vastly different. You take somebody from Somalia with a different language and culture and religion, and you take people from the Middle East, completely different mindset and culture. You throw them into America. And then you do it in mass numbers. What's that going to do? And what happened with these European groups that we brought in is we said, look, we need to pause and we need to have a common American system, common educational system, did a lot to kind of make the melting pot work. And we had to pause it for decades. No more people. Let's just all, and we got, to a large degree, the melting pot kind of worked if you do it that way. And what is the way I'm talking about? I'm saying largely the same religion, Christian or Catholic or various denominations of Christian, largely from the same ethnic and region from Europe, largely European, largely the same culture, because you can be a Christian from a different culture, right? The culture of a Christian in China is going to be vastly different than the culture of a Christian from Europe. So this kind of, and there was dominant racial groups, the British kind of were the dominant racial group, and that British culture is really what America was founded on. So if you have that as like 90% of and that was the thing before, 1980 or so, America was like 90% white, 90% Christian. And you could have a little bit of immigration there and it would still work. You would demand people assimilate and there are only small groups and it could work. If you start just completely replacing the population with masses of immigration from cultures that are nowhere near ours, it doesn't work. You're going to rip the country apart. There's nothing holding these groups together. There are a lot of these people, they come here and they have no respect or desire for America to succeed. They're just all about themselves. And I'll give you examples of that. And we started with examples of that, of what's going on in Somalia. Here, the amount of money that they are stealing. Let me give you, gosh, there's so many examples of this. I was talking about Somalians, but here's what's going on in Europe. Here's an example in Europe. A woman from Algeria in Spain. She's an immigrant from Algeria. And this is not even to attack the individuals. And a lot of times Christians, they mix this up. There's a difference between whole groups and generalities of groups and individuals. I could be nice to an individual immigrant, an individual Somalian person that I meet. It doesn't mean I'm going to ignore the reality of trends and statistics and how that affects public policy. And that's what I want to get into in a bit. And the Bible talks about this. A lot of times we look at what Jesus says when he talks about like, hey, somebody asks you for something, you give it to them. But he never said to do that with government policy and with other people's tax dollars. That's not what Jesus said. It's a real twisting of his words. Free money from tax dollars, you're stealing from others and giving their money, and you're doing it at a governmental level, not an individual level. That's completely different. Jesus's idea of giving is supposed to be individual, and you're not even supposed to. He said, don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing when you give. We're not talking about public policy. We're talking about individual giving. All right. In Spain, 27-year-old Algerian woman has been arrested for attempting to blind her 2-year-old son by repeatedly pouring an irritating liquid into his eyes over several months. She also has a 7-year-old daughter who is blind. Coincidence? No. She probably did it to him too, to the daughter too. It's believed that she did this deliberately to receive more social benefits. What's the point of this? These people do not have the same culture. They don't have the same culture as Americans or as Europeans. And they come here and they see us, they see our welfare system and they see our norms and the way we run our society. And they come from these third world countries where you're raised from a young age in this crabs in a bucket type of mentality. Because that's what it is in a lot of these third world countries. You're raised in, it's all about me, what I can get, because it's just survival. You're taught in, some of these cultures, some of these religions are like these pagan or atheist mindsets. And, India, Hinduism is, these spiritualist and animalist religions. You're basically taught that you're like an animal. So what would you expect humans to do when they're taught that from a young age? They're going to act like animals where survival is the most important thing. And so they come here and they see us and they see our welfare system and our high trust society and our system, kind of an honor system where you just take people's word for things. And it's like a predator seeing the prey they're hunting on its back with its soft belly in it. It's like that's easy target, easy pickings. And they just take. What can we get? What can we do? How can we game the system? The cultures are not the same. I'm gonna go through some of these headlines. Yeah, they caught the Jan 6 Jan 6 bomber. This is this is really interesting. I'm gonna come back to this. Okay, I want to discuss this headline really quickly. I want you to look at this Boston Dynamics and look at what this robot's doing, what it's trained to do. And I want you to ask yourself, how come all the videos that we see of these robots, they're always like this guy is doing like martial art techniques and he's practicing like falling down and getting up quickly and running, over terrain. And so that's not the kind of stuff that you would train on if you were training to be my cook and, my dishwasher. We're being told that these robots are going to do all our house chores. But I look at these videos and it looks like dudes training for war. So what's going on here? What are they actually going to use these robots for? Elon gave a hint to that recently when he said that they're going to be able to eliminate jails by having these robots because they'll be able to follow a inmate around wherever he goes. Wait, won't that mean they'll be able to do that to free citizens too? The dystopia that we're heading toward is insane. But okay, I digress. I'm looking for a particular article with Ilhan Omar. This is another one of these robots. Look at, they have them. They act like he's walking like a human. Isn't that cute? These robots are capable of doing a lot more creepy stuff and moving a lot faster. They just present them as humans and they walk like humans because, to disarm you. But the reality is they're machines, very scary machines. Okay, let's talk about this. Here we go. 1 in 10 people in France are Muslims today. That's insane. All right, here's the story I was looking for. Here's Ilhan Omar promoting the Safari restaurant in Minneapolis for feeding kids. The owner, who donated to her campaign, was convicted in the Feeding Our Future $250 million fraud scheme. So it's a organization or a restaurant called Feeding Our Future. What they did is they set up this restaurant. They said, hey, look, here's this Somali restaurant, whatever it is, and it's going to feed kids. And we're going to have this like feed the poor children type of situation. And we're going to take tax dollars for that to feed. And they were saying that they had numbers. I forget. It was like tens of thousands. It was at least in the thousands of children every day that we're feeding. Reality is it was like, I don't know the numbers exactly off the top of my head. It was like 40 kids or something crazy like that they were feeding every day. It was vastly lower, the reality. And then they were just pocketing the difference and saying, yeah, we're feeding these kids. And they weren't actually feeding them. They were just pocketing tax dollars. I mean, the amount of fraud that goes on in these communities it's insane. It's insane. Okay. I want to talk about a W from the Trump administration because I criticize them a lot, but I need to talk about the W's too. So here's RFK Jr. announcing that HSS has launched an investigation into a school accused of secretly vaccinating a child without the parents' consent. This is massive. It's a massive scandal, and it's huge that the Trump administration is going out. That's a W. And just doing this case, you've got to go after a lot of them, but doing it sends a message. It's very important. So I wanted to highlight that because it's a W. The Trump administration is doing great on this kind of stuff. What else? There's so many. There's so much stuff going on in the news. Here is, this case, and here's an L. So I talked about a W from the Trump administration. Here's an L. Here's a senator suggesting that the military should act to remove the president. He said, in many ways, the military might save us from this president. This is a senator. I want you to go and look up color revolution and look up what it is. And, what happens in a color revolution versus a traditional revolution. And what we're seeing in America is basically this, and it's not being taken seriously. People like this should be arrested. They really should be arrested. And military leaders, if they were to say things like this, this is openly calling for sedition, for treason. And it's not being dealt with in a serious way like it should. This is a color revolution, what we're watching happening in America today. Okay. Yeah, here we go. So not only are the Somalians ripping us off in America with Medicaid, all these different scams that they're ripping off tax dollars, but they're sending the money back to Somalia. 28 million went to a Somali warlord with a paramilitary force. So your tax dollars are going to fund terrorists in Somalia. And Christians are wondering, hey, should we just be nice and just keep sending this money? No, you're not. You're not being nice. You're not being kind if you are funding terrorists who are terrorizing their own citizens in Somalia. You are helping that happen, and that's not nice. Here's the mindset. I wanted to show this one also. This is in China. Here's the mindset of these third world countries. So China is like a third world country in mindset, its people, but it's a first world country in power. But they still have this kind of crabs in a bucket because they're atheists and they don't care and it's just whatever. And so they're going through, and there's a lot of reports lately where they're robbing the oceans. They're just going through and just like the fishing version of strip mining, just taking everything that you can. Like, for example, here they're electrocuting the waters, electrocuting the Persian Gulf to just kill everything in a certain area. And then you just grab it all. But it's killing, not only the fish, but they're killing, coral, sharks. The krill, they're starving whales and larger animals because they're just taking all of their food. And they're doing this in international waters, but then they do it also right along the edges of national waters in like South America and places like that. They just go right up to the edges of a country's national waters and take everything and take it back to China. And they don't care if they just collapse the entire ecosystem. It's just all about money and me right now and power for our country and wealth, and they don't care. You have to realize that these people have a different mindset. Here's another example. Somalis in Ohio have been exposed running an EBT fraud scheme, owning a restaurant, attached to grocery stores, using welfare benefits to buy ingredients in bulk, funneling them straight into cash paying eateries while reporting losses for tax write-offs. I mean, they're playing us. Why? They have a different mindset. It's a completely different mindset. Christians, you need to understand the mindset of we're going to help, we want to help people and we want to be good people. And as individuals, you want to like contribute to society and have a purpose and help the world, take care of your family, help the world in some way, leave a mark on this world, kind of that kind of thing. That mindset is a Christian mindset. Even if you're a liberal, that's a Christian mindset. You got it from the West, from being raised in a Christian culture. You need to realize that before Christianity, that mindset in most society, like ancient cultures like Greece and Rome, and you look at what the goal of life is in those societies, in those pagan societies, it's nowhere near. They wouldn't even cross their mind to let's take in a bunch of immigrants and give them free stuff. That was unheard of. It was stupid to them, and it wouldn't even cross their minds because that wasn't the goal in life. That wasn't a lot of these societies, you know, you read their stories, the Odyssey and the Iliad and things like that, and their epics, and the goal in life for them was like glory and making your name last through eternity. And Alexander the Great, how much of the world can I conquer? You know, things like that. And not to say that Christian nations didn't do anything like that, but the mindset of helping people to the extent that we do, it didn't cross their minds in the way it does today. Like the fact that at the United Nations, you know, it's largely a debate over, you know, is this atrocity happening? And let's accuse this country of doing this. And we need to condemn this because here's something bad happening here. And it's all from a moral argument. It's all moral arguments. Who's being moral or immoral? That's the debate at places like the United Nations. And in our politics today, we attack people from being moral or immoral. That mindset was not a mindset that you wouldn't even argue from that angle. If you were in ancient Greece, in ancient Rome, you would argue from what's best for us and forget everyone else. Because it was a dog-eat, and that mindset is so foreign to us. We can't even comprehend that we can't comprehend that when these immigrants come here, they have this mindset, because that's what it is in cultures like a Hindu culture in India. They're not thinking, how can we come in and just be productive citizens? They're thinking, what is best for me and my family and for my ethnic group? And they don't have any scruples about cheating the system. Now, that's not saying every individual, but generalities about the groups. By the way, can Christians make generalities about racial groups and ethnicities? Yes, we can. And it's stupid to ignore those stereotypes. Even about my own groups, I should be noticing that. The Bible, New Testament writers were talking about their own ethnic groups sometimes. It's just notice you can notice stereotypes without saying that applies to every individual. So for example, Paul talks about the Cretans. Go read about that. Go read about what Paul says about the Cretans, and notice he doesn't make any qualifications. He doesn't say, well, not all Cretans. He wasn't afraid to just make the generality, because it's true. He said, he called them evil bellies or something like that, right? He's like, they're he says their own prophets, their own writers say this stuff. Therefore, what's his solution? Rebuke them sharply, that they can be reformed, that they can be sound in the faith. When you don't recognize the reality of cultural groups being messed up, they can never fix it, because you never rebuke it, you never point it out, you're afraid to. Christians today are too afraid of not being nice. So we don't want to say any of this stuff. Read what the New Testament says about how we should do charity on a large scale, not just individual. You know, you're an individual, it's one thing. I can give to, without worrying about, hey, am I giving to the most worthy person? As an individual, I can do that. I can give to whoever I want. And there's nothing wrong with that. As a large group, as a policy, as a practice that a country takes, it's different. As a church, they should think about, well, which groups are we supporting? And there is talks in the New Testament about worthy people who are worthy of being supported by the church. In particular, it talks about single mothers. And this is not to attack single mothers. I had a single mother, was raised by a single mother. So that's not to attack, but it is to note that there was a policy that was put in the New Testament for the church, and it's actually for the benefit of these women as well. You don't want to just enable. You don't want to enable bad culture, bad practices, bad behaviors, bad culture. You don't want those things to be subsidized by the church. So go. I mean, hey, don't take my word for it. Don't get mad at me. Go read what Paul says. Read his qualifications for widows that should be supported by the church. Go read it. It's in one of the Timothys. I mean, it's amazing. This is never discussed. And then Paul also talks about he who does not work, the same should not eat. Work requirements, right? There's nothing evil about that. There's nothing evil about that. In fact, that's good for people because you're demanding that they step up, become self-supporting, and that is what is actually better for somebody. That's what's actually going to make somebody happier. Not just being, sucking on the government teat, so to speak, or, living off of welfare forever. It's not good for somebody's mentality. It's not good for the country. You can't run a country like that. All right. So, China's ripping these places off. This mindset. And this is largely the stuff that I had to talk about today. Oh, I wanted to talk about this one really briefly. So here's a new animated series, and we'll probably end on this. Here's a new animated series called Steps. And it's following Cinderella's evil stepsisters who are depicted as kind and misunderstood. And you notice this is a trend lately. This is a trend. Again, it's attacking from a Christian, let's be nice and tolerant angle. But this is a trend in movies lately. And notice they're all really attacking girls. Wicked is all about, the Wicked Witch and how she's not that bad. Maleficent, Cruella de Vil, she's just, it's Cruel Devil. That's what her name comes from. But she was just misunderstood. She wasn't that bad, right? And it's all these taking the perspective of the bad guy and making it so they're just misunderstood, and you should sympathize with them. And notice that it's mostly all women. It's girls. It's going after young girls by having girls as the lead character. Interesting, right? Why? Because if you're told that the evil people are just misunderstood, what are you going to internalize as a child? That you can just be evil and just blame everyone else and say, I was misunderstood, right? And if you're constantly sympathizing with that side, you are subconsciously being pulled, your sympathies are being pulled to the side of the devil. Because that's basically what they're claiming he was, is just misunderstood. There's another example of this in, what's it called? New movie just came out, Zootopia 2. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, the basic plot line is, definite spoiler alert, but if you haven't seen it, the basic plot line is that a snake is actually the good guy. And snakes were cast out and from Zootopia land, but it's actually the good guy. and all the other animals. And there's one animal in particular that has white hair. I won't go into all the details, but the white hair, and that's the bad guy. And it claimed that it was the creator of Zootopia that had the patent for Zootopia. But the creator of Zootopia, it was actually lied, and the snake character was the real creator of Zootopia and was misunderstood and cast out, but it was actually the good guy. And the white haired animal is the bad guy who lied and stole and pretended it was the creator, but it's not. This is Gnosticism, by the way. It's taking Bible themes, flipping them upside down. The good guy becomes the bad guy, God becomes bad, the devil becomes good. That's Gnosticism. The creator really, it's the snake who's the creator. So now it's making it so the devil's the good guy and the creator, and God stole that from the devil, right? It's flipping the Bible upside down. These are twisted, perverted teachings that are being put in children's stories. And it's getting subconsciously in their mind. Also in Zootopia, part of the plot line, Zootopia 2, part of the plot line is that you have to read this book, but this book is misunderstood. You have to read it through the eyes of a serpent who can see the hidden message and see what it really says. This is also Gnostic. Gnostics teach that you can only understand the Bible from their secret knowledge, and then they flip everything upside down in the Bible, and that's how you really understand it. It's a lie, obviously, but that's what they teach, and that's what's being put in all these children's movies. So to put it short, these new movies like Zootopia 2 and Wicked, Maleficent, Cruella, and this new one, Steps, that kind of take the side of like Cinderella's evil stepsisters, and Cruella de Vil takes the side of the bad character and says they're just misunderstood. The goal of this is to get children to align with really ultimately evil and the devil, because that's basically what the argument is, that what we call evil in society is really just misunderstood. They're good people, they're just misunderstood. It's Gnostic, it's demonic, and that's what's, Hollywood's pushing on our kids. All right, so to close, how should Christians view immigration was the question that we had. Again, I'll repeat, it's one thing to, as a Christian, be kind to an individual immigrant. There's nothing wrong with that, and it's something you should do. But you do not have to take that to mean that you need to give up your entire country, have people flood the country in record numbers. It's not unchristian to say, I want to stop the taking over of this country. I don't want my kids to grow up in a third world country, because that's what this is going to become if we're going to flood the country with third worlders. If you are bringing in masses of people, like, massive of Muslims from Somalia that are all congregating together, it's not like you're bringing them over for evangelism. These Muslims, they're not trying to convert. They're staying in their own little community. They're separating. They're attacking Christianity. They are going to make it so that your country is no longer Christian. That's what they want to do. So far from converting anybody or just being nice to them, you're enabling people's bad habits, just living off welfare and not, ever getting their lives together, just robbing the country. You're hurting the people who are already here. You're not being Christian at all by hurting the people who are already here. And you're making it so that you can't practice Christianity in those areas where Sharia starts taking over. So you're being tricked in your mindset to think that you're helping where you're actually hurting people. It's this perverted view of Christianity. So these levels of immigration should be opposed. And I think what I would say is that we should pause all immigration. And maybe if we ask for such an extreme view, what we'll actually get is probably what we should have, where it's like 95% of it stopped. But I would call for pausing all of it for decades. And that's not an unchristian thing to say. It's not an unchristian thing to propose. And I think that's the correct position, especially when you look at what's happening. Not only that, we should deport masses of these people, anyone, and kudos to the Trump administration for starting to go through with ICE, cut off all the benefits. A lot of these people will deport themselves because they're only here for a free meal ticket and tax remittances like crazy. And let's start taking care of the American people who are here. What's wrong with that? What's unchristian about taking care of the people who are here? They're human beings too. Americans are human beings too. What's wrong with taking care of them is what I would say. And I would also say, you know, God is the one who divided the nations. He doesn't want a one world government. Go read in Genesis, I think 11. He opposed the Tower of Babel, and he divided the nations. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing, generally speaking. All right, that's enough for today. Thank you guys. Like, share, subscribe. We again, this is on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Rumble, and X, and will be posted as a podcast on Apple and Spotify later. So please follow on all those places, and God bless you. We will see you again soon.